She sat across from me in that dimly lit cafe, the kind of place with too many fairy lights and not enough truth. Her eyes sparkled, though I couldn't tell if it was from joy or performance, and she let out a laugh, loud and rehearsed, as if she were the star of a sitcom only she could hear. It wasn't the joke that made me pause, it was the space behind it. She leaned forward, expecting my laughter to join hers, like most people do when they toss out something charming. But I didn't laugh. I didn't even smile. I just looked at her. Not with judgment, not with malice, just quietly, observing, listening, not to her words, but to the echo inside them. "Why aren't you laughing?" she finally asked, her smile faltering. I could have lied, played along, pretended, but I've learned something dangerous over the years, something both liberating and isolating. When you see through things, it becomes nearly impossible to pretend they're whole. So I told her the truth. It would feel fake. She blinked, stunned. That soft, agreeable mask slipped for half a second, just enough to reveal the discomfort beneath it. And without a word, she stood up, adjusted her coat like armor, and walked away. No angry outburst, no tears, just a silent, final exit. She never looked back, and yet that moment did. It followed me for weeks, not because I missed her, but because I understood something darker in that interaction, something I had tried to ignore for years. The deeper I think, the lonelier I become. You ever feel that? That strange, slow-burning ache in your chest, like you're wide awake in a world that's dreaming. It's not the kind of loneliness you cure with company. You could be in a room full of people, smiling, nodding, exchanging pleasantries, and still feel completely unseen. Because they're talking about weather and outfits, and you're thinking about the architecture of emotions, the quiet grief of growing older, the psychological roots of desire. They say you're too intense, too serious, too much. But what they really mean is you're too real. And in a world built on performance, where conversations are curated like Instagram posts and emotions are edited for likability, realness doesn't feel refreshing. It feels threatening. You're not rude, you're not cold. You're just unwilling to fake laughter, to nod when you disagree, to play a role in a script you never signed up for. And that terrifies people. Because when someone chooses honesty over harmony, they disrupt the whole show. You see, most people don't want truth. They want validation. They want comfort. They want to laugh at jokes. Not because they're funny, but because that's what you're supposed to do. Smile, nod, keep things light. But when you don't, when you pause and say, "That felt fake," you're not just breaking a social rule, you're breaking the illusion. And when illusions break, people panic. That's why she left. Not because I was unkind, but because I was clear. Clear in a way she wasn't ready for. Maybe no one ever had been. And yet, I've come to accept this. Silence, when you're real, becomes your constant companion. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of depth. Of standing at the bottom of the ocean while the world plays in the shallows. And it's heavy, but it's also true. So when people ask me why I didn't laugh, I no longer hesitate. I say, because it wasn't honest. And if they walk away, let them. Because I would rather sit in silence with my truth than speak 1,000 lies just to be understood. Why do deep thinkers get ghosts instead of roses? Why does depth, something we say we crave, become a repellent when it finally arrives? They told us that being smart, self-aware, and emotionally honest would make us better partners. But what they didn't say is that it might make us unbearable to those still clinging to illusions. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the intelligent man, the one who doesn't flirt with pickup lines, but dismantles the concept of flirting entirely. The one who doesn't chase trends, but quietly watches the crowd chase them, wondering why no one stops to ask where it's all going. He doesn't blend in. He doesn't play the game, not out of pride, but out of refusal to pretend. And that's where the trouble begins. Because society doesn't want truth. It wants comfort. It wants you to smile on cue, agree with the script, keep things light and predictable. But the conscious man is a mirror. And mirrors are dangerous when people are afraid of their own reflection. When you're a man who sees clearly, who questions systems, sees through masks, and refuses to be manipulated, you become unreadable, unpredictable, unsafe. Not because you're violent, but because you're real. And real is terrifying in a world built on performance. Nowhere is this more obvious than in dating. Modern relationships are built on convenience, dopamine, validation loops. We swipe, we ghost, we pretend love is easy, as if it should never demand anything real from us. But the intelligent man doesn't want convenience. He wants connection. And connection requires discomfort, vulnerability, depth, truth, which is exactly what most people are trying to avoid. So he sits there, quiet at dinner, unmoved by charm, uninterested in pretending. And she mistakes that stillness for coldness, that honesty for criticism, that solitude for rejection. But he's not distant. He's clear. He doesn't love like a rom-com. He loves like a lighthouse, still, steady, guiding, but only for those willing to brave the storm. That's his gift and his curse. Because once someone is truly seen by him, they can never go back to surface-level affection. And yet, most do, because depth comes with weight. And not everyone is ready to carry it. Women often say, "He intimidates me." But what they usually mean is, "He doesn't play by the rules I'm used to winning with. He doesn't flatter to get attention. He doesn't chase to prove worth. He doesn't need you to feel whole." And that's terrifying in a world that teaches us to feel lovable only when we're needed. He's not heartless. He just refuses to trade his truth for comfort. Søren Kierkegaard, the 19th century philosopher and one of the loneliest minds in history, understood this torment. He called it the sickness unto death, a slow spiritual suffocation, the death of the self in exchange for acceptance. Most men today aren't in pain because they're broken. They're in pain because they're buried, under expectations, under masks, under scripts they never wrote, but were told to memorize. Be nice, be successful, be impressive, but never be too much. And slowly, quietly, they vanish, not in body, in soul. And this is the true tragedy of intelligence. It doesn't make you better, it makes you conscious. And being conscious in an unconscious world is not a gift, it's a burden. Because once you see the patterns, you can't unsee them. You see how people confuse attention with love, how validation replaces intimacy, how curated profiles become substitutes for connection. And most terrifying of all, you see how much pretending is happening, not just in dating, but everywhere. And you realize, I can't play along, because the moment you stop pretending, you stop fitting in. And when you stop fitting in, you start walking alone. But what if that solitude isn't punishment? What if it's power? Kierkegaard warned of the crowd. He called it untruth. Because the crowd doesn't think, it reacts. It doesn't feel, it follows. It doesn't love, it performs. And the intelligent man, he refuses to dissolve into that performance. He's not trying to be difficult. He's trying to stay alive, alive to himself. But authenticity has a cost. It always has. When a man chooses truth over comfort, clarity over charm, solitude over superficiality, he will be misunderstood, often, deeply. Because most people aren't afraid of intelligence. They're afraid of what intelligence reveals. The man who refuses to play the game exposes the game. He holds up a mirror and says, "This is who we've become." And that's what makes him dangerous. Not because he wants power, but because he doesn't need it. He wants only one thing, to be known deeply, without performance, without masks. And that, ironically, is what makes him so rare, so misunderstood, so alone. But here's the paradox. The more conscious you become, the more your loneliness transforms. It stops feeling like exile and starts feeling like freedom. Because now you're alone, not because no one wanted you, but because you finally stopped betraying yourself for anyone who didn't see you. And maybe that's the most powerful form of love there is. The love you give yourself when no one else is ready for your truth. The world doesn't need more men who blend in. It needs more men who remember who they are, who are willing to walk alone, to be misunderstood, to sit at a table with someone who laughs at their own jokes and still not fake a laugh back. Not because they're cruel, but because they're honest. The intelligent man is not a myth. He is not broken. He is not too much. He is a mirror, a lighthouse, a whisper in a world screaming for attention. He's not waiting to be liked. He's waiting to be met by someone who isn't afraid of depth, of discomfort, of the terrifying, beautiful weight of real love. So if you're that man, don't dim your light. Let them walk away. Not everyone is meant to see you. But when someone finally does, they won't just see you, they'll remember themselves. And in that moment, after all the silence, the solitude, the sorrow, you'll finally understand. You were never too much. You were just waiting for someone who was enough.